Good Wednesday morning. Thanks for joining us on KARE 11 News Now. I'm Megan McPherson. 15 people are facing federal charges accused of conspiracy to injure a federal officer during Operation Metro Surge. The U.S. Attorney's Office says all the defendants are from a, quote, Antifa group called Direct Action Minnesota. Audrey Russo has details from the federal courthouse where in the last 24 hours, some of the defendants appeared before a judge for the first time.
Good morning. As those defendants were appearing before the judge, things got fairly tense outside here at the St. Paul Federal Courthouse. Now, there was a clash between law enforcement and some demonstrators, and at one point, a chemical irritant was actually used on some folks that were trying to keep the doors of the courthouse propped open. Take a look at this video. You can see the fray as it was unfolding yesterday afternoon. A lot of pushing and a lot of shoving there. Now, inside, the courtroom was packed with family, friends, and supporters of the 15 defendants. Some of their charges include stalking and assault. Now, the 94-page indictment accuses one defendant of following an agent from the Whipple building to their home during Operation Metro Surge, and others of throwing blocks of ice at agents. Now, the indictment doesn't list any injuries, and U.S. Attorney Dan Rosen didn't answer when asked if any federal agents were hurt. As for the fray outside the courthouse, here's how one of the defense attorneys described it.
I've never seen people violently attacked for peacefully protesting outside the federal courthouse.
Now, as for what comes next in this case, federal prosecutors tried to have the defendants held in detention, but the judge ultimately ordered that that wasn't necessary. The judge did, however, order that the defendants have no contact with each other, and they're now barred from doing any sort of protest activity on federal properties. Back to you.
This morning, the convicted mastermind in the massive Feeding Our Future fraud scheme is appealing that conviction and her sentence. In May, 44-year-old Bach was sentenced to 500 months in prison, more than 41 years, for her role in exploiting a federally funded child nutrition program during the COVID-19 pandemic. Prosecutors say instead of feeding vulnerable children, Bach bought luxury vehicles and real estate. Bach now says the judge didn't apply sentencing guidelines properly and that the guidelines are unconstitutional. In just hours, the man accused of stabbing Derek Chauvin will head back to court. The former Minneapolis police officer is serving time for the 2020 murder of George Floyd. Prosecutors say John Turshak stabbed Chauvin 22 times with a makeshift knife while inside an Arizona prison. He told FBI agents he wanted to hurt Chauvin because he's a high-profile inmate. Turshak has pleaded not guilty. His hearing is scheduled for 11:20 this morning. An update this morning on the man arrested in last week's police standoff on Eat Street. 31-year-old Tyler O'Brien is now facing 21 charges, including 18 counts of first-degree assault. This is video from that scene last week near West 28th Street and Nicollet Avenue. Charging documents say O'Brien fired 15 to 20 shots through windows and doors toward officers and people as deputies tried to serve a felony warrant. Documents say there was also a 3-year-old in his apartment when the first shots were fired. Also developing this morning, a new report finds the cost to extend the Blue Line light rail is going up again as some lawmakers push to stop the plan in its tracks for good. Jennifer Hoff has more on what this analysis found.
We'll get started here shortly.
What was a small community meeting
Very pleased to have this report come out.
turned into a shouting match over a topic that's long been controversial and could change several cities, including Minneapolis's north side, if the Blue Line rail extension goes through, a 13-mile plan to Brooklyn Park. A new report found now costs $3.5 billion, something the legislature ordered the Metropolitan Council to conduct last year as the Hennepin County project costs keep going up and ridership still down.
Before we make another bad decision, I think we need to take a look at the options.
Republican Representative and House Transportation Chair John Kosnick said the report also studied bus rapid transit, finding if it shares traffic lanes can cost as little as $120 million.
Hennepin County has to decide if they really want to go to their taxpayers and say, yes, we think spending $3.6 billion, a huge amount of money, is the right way to go.
In a statement, the county calls light rail faster and more reliable, writing nothing drives economic growth, more housing, and good-paying jobs like light rail. Adding, amongst 52 miles of light rail already in this region, $14 billion was invested in development, including 36,000 new housing units. But back in north, Businesses could close during construction, some even for good, changing communities either way.
It would be an abuse of power for them to actually build the train, knowing what these figures look like.
The Metropolitan Council says the extension will cost another $336 million, pushing the entire project to nearly $3.6 billion. Hennepin County says the 13-mile project is faster and more reliable, but some lawmakers want to scrap the project, saying there are cheaper options like bus rapid transit. Happening today, the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board will decide whether to close a popular off-leash dog park. The board says studies and interviews with indigenous historians determined the area is a sacred site for the Dakota people. Commissioner Jason Garcia says with that understanding, continuing to use the space as an off-leash dog park no longer felt appropriate. But not everyone agrees, though. A group of dog owners who regularly use the park launched an online petition urging commissioners to delay tonight's vote. The petition calls on the board to, quote, engage in a transparent public process and commit to a compromise that protects sacred spaces without destroying a vital community resource. Turning now to national headlines this morning, President Trump holding more meetings today with world leaders of the G7 summit before heading to Versailles for a special dinner with the president of France. He's working to sell the framework of a deal with Iran while looking ahead to trying to end the war in Ukraine. And all of this as we're also learning new details about an alleged plot to target the president and other government leaders at the UFC fight night on the White House grounds. NBC's Alice Barr is in Evian, France, covering the summit.
President Trump wrapping 3 days of diplomacy, meeting today with G7 allies, then Egypt's president, all ahead of a press conference amid questions about the framework for peace with Iran.
It's a very strong deal. Nobody knows what it is, but it's very strong.
Top lawmakers in both parties say they're yet to be briefed on the deal.
I certainly have not yet, although we are requesting that.
He needs to stop keeping America in the dark.
The president said today the memorandum of understanding is not final.
If I don't like it, we'll go back to shooting at them, dropping bombs on their head.
But said the deal keeps Iran from ever having a nuclear weapon, does not include U.S. investments in Iran, and guarantees an open, toll-free Strait of Hormuz. Already one tracking site shows average U.S. gas prices dropping below $4 a gallon, though industry experts say shipping won't return to normal for weeks, while trickier questions still need to be worked out on the details of Iran's nuclear program and the status of Israeli Hezbollah fighting in Lebanon, even as President Trump insists Iran is a done deal.
In the rear view mirror.
Signaling a shift in focus to Ukraine after meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky on the summit's sidelines as G7 leaders pledge more support against Russian attacks. While back stateside, the FBI says law enforcement foiled an attack on Sunday night's UFC fight night on the White House lawn, arresting 5 people accused of plotting to target the crowd that included President Trump with explosives-laden drones and guns, as the president pushes to trade firepower for diplomacy on the world stage.
In another sign of lingering tensions, a U.S. official tells NBC News that Iran has fired multiple drones at ships in the Strait of Hormuz since the agreement was announced, and the U.S. has been shooting them down. In Evian-les-Bains, France, Alice Barr, NBC News.
AAA projects 72.2 million Americans will be traveling this July 4th holiday. 85% of those, roughly 61 million, will drive to their destination. While gas prices have fallen a bit over the past few weeks, the average price per gallon is still more than 80 cents higher per gallon than last year. That's according to AAA. And the airports will be packed as well. Another 5.85 million are projected to take to the skies on domestic flights. As for other ways you could get going where you're going, 4.93 million are expected to take buses, trains, or cruises, up more than 5% from last year. AAA says cruises are gaining in popularity for vacation options, with travelers knowing the total trip cost thanks to all-inclusive packages. And the countdown is on to the Special Olympics USA Games. After stops across the country, the torch is now making its final leg, making stops across Minnesota before the games start this weekend. And this year's games will unite thousands of athletes, coaches, volunteers, and fans from all 50 states, and they'll be treated to Olympic-level excitement for the opening ceremony on Saturday. Morgan Wolf went to Huntington Bank Stadium, where preparations are underway.
Huntington Bank Stadium has seen many Gopher football wins, hosted world-famous artists like Beyonce, and come this weekend, they can add the opening ceremonies to the Special Olympics USA Games to that list.
Technical team, the stage management team, the design team, the video producing team, of course broadcast.
Hundreds of hands getting ready for visitors from all 50 states.
Once you dip into ceremonies, you'll never look back. They're amazing. They rope you in.
Michael Shan and Sarah Shives are organizing the opening ceremonies that will welcome 25,000 people to the games.
Almost 30 years. Long time.
The duo have a combined 50 years of experience in production, including planning the Sochi Olympic ceremonies and Pan Ams.
To me, the big difference here is that this ceremony and the closing ceremony as well is for the athletes.
2 years of planning leading up to this week. They're putting in work around the clock and have multiple backup plans if weather doesn't cooperate.
First time I've ever been able to work from home on an event like this. So that's terrific. That's amazing.
Demi Lovato and John Baptiste are the headlines, but there are many more performances marking a memorable moment for these Minnesotans.
I think once we get through the athlete parade, I might cry the whole rest of the time because it's just so meaningful, and to see the smiles and the joy on the faces of these athletes who've worked really hard to get here to become Olympians, then it makes it all worth it.
Morgan Wolf, KARE 11 News.
Stick with us. More news and weather is coming up after the break.